Yeah.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the opening event for the 2021 Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month. The Inclusive Excellence Education Development Hub, or the Hub, is pleased to have us joining us in both in person and virtually for this exciting day. My name is Olga Chavez Reyes. I am a third-year student in the business program. I am a member of the Hispanic Student Union. I am looking forward to what is ahead for today. To get started, those who are on Zoom, we are broadcasting this via YouTube, so please ensure your mic is muted and your camera is optional. Just remember that if your camera is on, even though it's broadcasting speaker view, there's always a chance you could be seen. Someone will be monitoring the chat both in Zoom and on YouTube, should you have questions later for a question and answer time. Those in person, you will have a chance to ask questions once our featured speaker has concluded his remarks. Now I would like to start the program today with our opening remarks from the president of the SIU system, Dr. Dan Mahoney. President Mahoney started in March of 2020, and as shown from the beginning of his time with us, he has a solid commitment for anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. He is a frequent attendee of many of our events and enjoys getting to know our faculty, staff, students, and community members. And he joins us today via Zoom. Thank you, President Mahoney, for being here, and the floor is yours for the opening remarks.
Well, thank you, and sorry I can't be there with you in person, but I did want to welcome everybody on behalf of the system to this opening event for Hispanic Latinx Heritage Month, which runs from the 15th of September through the 15th of October. This began as Hispanic Heritage Week back in 1968, and it expanded to really a month of activities that are focused on celebrating the Hispanic and Latinx culture, as well as the contributions of Hispanic and Latinx people to the United States. And so it's great to be part of this. Our theme this year is Esperanza, a celebration of Hispanic heritage and hope. And I find a lot to be hopeful about right now. As was mentioned, we're very much focused on anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion across the system, as well as at the SIUE campus. And there's lots of activities and initiatives that I think are going to change the way we operate as a university system and as an individual university going forward. On top of that, we're starting to see real changes in our student demographics. We're seeing an increasing number of students who identify as Hispanic or Latinx. Those numbers are growing rapidly, faster than really just about any other group in the United States and in both our campuses here at SIU. And what we will see, I think, in the next, going forward, is it really increased both in both faculty and staff, as well as students who are Hispanic and Latinx. And so when I think about the 20-year-olds who are with us now, what the university will look like when they're my age will be vastly different than certainly the university looks today, and a whole lot different than the university looked when I was a student in the early 80s. So I'm very optimistic about where we're headed and what the future holds. The nice thing about the Heritage Week or Heritage Month is the opportunities to learn, and there's lots of opportunities. I encourage you to take advantage of those. We have everything from things that will focus on sharing information on DACA to listening sessions and always the activities that focus on food, which are some of the best. So again, there's something for everybody, I think, to get involved with. I would certainly highlight the inclusive conversations. This is something we do 10 times a year at SIUE. They're from 12:15 to 1:30 on Fridays. The first one is September 24th, and that will focus on Spanish language in the United States. And the one on October 8th, at that again, same time, we'll focus on health disparities, community outreach, and outcomes among Hispanic and Latinx populations. So again, I encourage you again, attend both of those, but also continue to get involved with the inclusive conversations. Again, they're always a very big highlight for what we do relative to anti-racism, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I also want to point out Dr. Sheila Caldwell, our first Vice President for Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is with you all today, and you'll be hearing from her later. If you've not heard us talk, again, a lot about what we're doing, she will certainly be able to share things with you. But really, as a university system, we're looking to find ways that we can do better and be a better system, and again, a better universities. So there's opportunities to provide input, to get involved, and I encourage you to do that whenever those opportunities present themselves. So again, welcome to everybody, and we thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you so much, President Mahoney. We appreciate you being here. At this time, we'll be hearing from SIE Chancellor, Dr. Randy Benbrook. Chancellor Benbrook also attends so many of our events and really does all that he can with the busy schedule he has available for our events. We appreciate his regular presence and dedication to the students, and although he tries to be present, he wasn't able to be here in person today. He sent a video so he could still share some remarks with us, and here's a video from him now.
Sorry, I just realized I need to put the video up here. Pardon me 1 second. My apologies, everyone. I'm having a little technical difficulty. Be right with you. Okay, here it goes. My apologies. I can't seem to be getting it to work, so I'm going to work on it behind the scenes and we'll keep moving on to the next piece. Download.
As we prepare for a special guest speaker, I just want to quickly share what this moment means to me. I've always been the only Latinx in my community. I graduated being one of two, my whole class of 600. Seeing how many Latinx representation, it makes me feel like home and actually makes me feel like I can be a part of something and not be the only person doing it. And thank you again for having me. It's now my honor to introduce our guest speaker today, Julio Ricardo Valera. Mr. Valera is an editorial director of Co-Interim Executive Director of Futuro Media and founder of Latino Rebels. As editorial director of Futuro Media, Julio Ricardo Valera is responsible for overall editorial version and voice of Latino USA, Latino Rebels, and In the Thick. As Vice President of New Business Development of Futuro Studios, he also heads up the division's new business initiatives, which we have received industry accolades and have positioned Futuro for continued sustainable success. In 2011, Julio founded Latino Rebels, one of the top U.S. Latino digital media sites in the world. 2018, LR officially joined the Futuro Media family. He is also co-host in The Thick with Maria Inosa. He is a frequent contributor to Latino USA and is a digital director for Futuro from 2015-2020. Julio expanded the show's digital footprint, overseeing historical gains in online and social audiences. Previously, Julio was digital producer of Al Jazeera America's The Stream, and his work has been featured in many global outlets, including the New York Times, Washington Post, The Atlantic, The Guardian, ESPN, NBC News, Face Nation, Univision, and Telemundo. He has made numerous national TV appearances from Latino USA and Futuro Media. In 2015, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists honored Julio with the inaugural Dale Award given to an individual or company that steps up and goes above and beyond to ensure Latinos are fairly and accurately represented. A native of Puerto Rico, Julio spent his childhood between San Juan and the Bronx. He was also a contributing reporter at the Boston Globe and top publishing executive. Julio graduated cum laude from Harvard College. Without further ado, here is Julio Ricardo Guerrera.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Again, I'm Julio Ricardo Varela. I wish I was there with you physically. I'm actually streaming from the Boston area, which I call home, and I've called home since 1986. And I am a proud parent of 2 college students right now. So congratulations on the start of the academic year. It's actually nice to see people gathered together in a space. And I'm just really, really thankful that I can partake in this session today. So what I want to talk a little bit about, knowing that the theme is about Hispanic Heritage Month and pride and achievement, I want to step back and actually focus a little bit on recent news that has happened with the Latino community in the United States. And I don't know, I'm a journalist at heart. I have a lot of titles. I get to do Latino USA with Maria Hinojosa, In the Thick, our political podcast with Maria Hinojosa, who founded Futuro Media 11 years ago. And Maria is one of the first, the first Latina correspondent at NPR. And back in the day, she was the first Latina correspondent at CNN. So one of the things we've always been able to follow in trying to frame where the Latino community is growing in this country is the census. And I don't know if you know, but about a month ago, the census came out with a very detailed sort of 2020 data slice of the United States. And the reason being is, if you know, the census is used for redistricting of congressional maps. It's the reason why some states might have 2 more congressional seats while another state might lose one. And so you use a lot of the census data to reflect where the community is at. So a lot of takeaways come out of this. And one of the biggest takeaways that I really want to kind of frame the rest of my comments, but I really want to always start with data because, it is an academic space. And I'm a journalist, and I always like to base my takes on data. So for people that need to understand, in the last 10 years, the US population has grown, right? I believe the number was, I have my notes here, 331 million people, right? Which is an increase of about 22.7 million people in the last 10 years. As you know, the census is always every 10 years. So of that 22.7 million, just to give you a little bit perspective and kind of talk about how the country is indeed changing more and more. More than 1 out of every 2 of that population growth. So let's say about 11 and change, right? 11.3 or 4 identifies as Latino, Hispanic, Latinx. So essentially, of that 22 million, more than 1.2, so like 1 out of every 2 people in the United States in population growth in the last 10 years identifies as Latino, Latinx, Hispanic. So think about that, right? That is a pretty significant growth. In addition, so the Latino population right now, according to the census, and I'm just pulling up my chart because I don't like to screen share with these sometimes because sometimes like technology takes over, especially, but just so you know, that accounts for about 18.7% of the US population. In 2010, it was about 17%. So it was a pretty significant increase. But the bigger increase, and I think you are in a state that does have a does have a Latino population. But the bigger thing that people need to know is that the states where that represent 10% of more, the states where Latinos represent 10% or more of the overall population has increased by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 states. So not only places like, I believe now the number is about 26. So think about, we all know about Latino populations, even in Illinois, where you think about Chicago or New York or Miami or Florida, and people say Texas, New Mexico, California, a lot of places like that. But it's interesting to note that states like Massachusetts, like where I live, Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, the South is actually the fastest growing region for the Latino population in the United States. A state like Oklahoma, Nebraska, Wyoming are all places now that have more than 10% of the population that identifies as Latino. So it's obviously we're seeing that this is no longer moving in a place that is just limited to the states that I like to say, Texas, California, Florida, New York, places like that. But so that alone is an important data point. Another data point that I just want to share is that 24 states where there's 24 states where Latinos represent either the largest racial or ethnic group or the second largest. So think about that. That is something that has changed in a lot of ways. Now, the reason I say this is that you kind of want to frame sort of all the predictions that have been made for the last 30, 40 years about the fact that we were going to see a growing population with the Latino community, and we're seeing it now. And it's actually very young, right? I believe the median age right now is in the late 20s, whereas the white population in the United States is declining and is actually getting older. So we understand that there is a shift happening, and we're kind of witnessing the shift. So there's issues, there's things that are being discussed right now. And that actually comes with good developments and also negative developments. The other thing I want to say before I get into sort of Hispanic Heritage Month and other things is that also what you're seeing with the census, which I think is really important. And if you really want to understand how this community is changing, I encourage you to go to census.gov. There's an incredible report about a month ago that really breaks it down. If you're like me, I like data tables and I looking at congressional districts and all that, and I get really geeky. And I've learned a lot, right? I've learned a lot about the changing population, and it gives you some, I always steer people to the census because it's very reliable data. It's as good as we can get. No census is perfect, but at least you can speak with authority. So I expect you, when you write your academic papers, to always use the census data because that's always important. But the other thing that has changed, because I really want to kind of break down two things here in my remarks: the issue of race and ethnicity, and the Latino community is not necessarily a racial group, right? It is an ethnic group, and we have to really understand that a little bit more. So I just want to offer a little bit more on the census and then begin to break down what I've been seeing as a reporter, covering as an editor, talking to students such as yourselves and other universities. What we've seen as the census has changed is that the history of the census, the category of white has evolved over time. And this is the first time that people were given the opportunity to choose multiple labels. And so what we're seeing now in the US population is not only are we seeing more people who are identifying ethnically as Latino, but racially they're choosing whether I'm white and Latino or Black and Latino or multiracial. I'm Latino. You know, the data has clearly proven that identity can be messy, but it is more multiracial and it is more multicultural in a lot of ways. So all the predictions that people were saying 30 years ago are coming to light. But this is where I kind of do a little bit of a detour, because this is where I think the real conversation begins. And I'm here, right? I am here to give this keynote, but I'm also opening it to questions and answers because I love to interact with students and really get into conversation. So I'm conscious of how much time we have, but I just want to add a couple more points. And then I really do want to open this up because I don't want to turn this into just me talking. But the big thing that we're seeing, and it's actually coming from your generation of students, is that we're challenging what it is to be Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, Latina in this country, right? So I want to give you another specific example so that you can go and take something away. So Latino USA, which was a show that I'm a part of, Peabody, a winning show that Maria Hinojosa produces. It's on 220 public radio stations, where I have a podcast. About 10 years ago, we published a segment, and you can just Google this and just say the invention of Hispanics. That's the title of the segment. And what it does, it brings a history of how the government was looking at the Hispanic community in the 70s and the 80s, because we all come from different countries, right? We all have different experiences, even though we have this Hispanic Heritage Month, Latinx Hispanic Heritage Month. You're dealing with 20 plus countries, different experiences. You know, I come from the Caribbean diaspora, born and raised in Puerto Rico. My experience as a Puerto Rican growing up compared to someone who identifies as Mexican or Mexican American in the borderland in Arizona, there's not a lot that we have in common. We might share a common language. We might share, family, like in terms of like the culture of family. But there really is, growing up in Phoenix, Arizona, and growing up in San Juan, Puerto Rico, or growing up is very different, right? But what you see when this notion of the invention of Hispanics, because it's very important to think about what this means when you say invention, because it seems like it becomes imposed, is that the US government and the census were trying to figure out a way to categorize our community. So if you go to this site called The Invention of Hispanics, you'll see that in 1980, there was this huge campaign promoted by the Spanish language networks like Univision and Telemundo to kind of tell Latinos, Hispanics, that you need to mark Hispanic on the census. But again, it gets to my point about Latino is not a race, it is an ethnicity. So that's when we start getting into this messy territory that has continued to sort of evolve over time. So the big takeaway is what we're seeing now is sort of a challenge of what Latinidad means, right? What does it really mean? Because when we talk about anti-racism, and I applaud the university to just hear the word anti-racism and anti-racist curriculum. One of the things that I keep telling people, especially during this time, is that within the own Latino community, the history of racism and through colonialism, through through enslaved people in Latin America, through sort of the casting of races. They're literal castes, right? If you look at the history of Latin America, there's categories of racial castes that the whiter you were, the more successful you had a chance to be. And that has been carried over into our community. And so when we're trying to figure this out ourselves, our community, in sort of this new, like this place called the United States, some of which of us immigrated, some of us here were born in the United States. People tend to forget that the US and Mexico had a war in the 19th century, and the United States won the territory from like Texas all the way to California. Those are real lives there. Those are people who were living in Mexican territory, who then all of a sudden were like, you live in the United States now. And so that is only, when you separate yourself from the Civil War, where we've had these conversations in the last couple of years, looking back at America's history of white supremacy, subjugation of enslaved peoples from Africa, indigenous populations, we tend to overlook a little bit sort of that when it comes to people that live here, who are Latino, that have lived here in this country. And there's a history of anti-Mexican violence. There's a history of you look at the term Operation Wetback, which is, that is the term that the federal government used in the 50s to deport Mexican families back to Mexico. And these were people that have been living in American territory forever. So when you start looking at, to get to the point, it's like we all have different experiences. Like I said, I, as a Puerto Rican, because the United States had a war in 1898, we became a US territory. And then in 20 years, we became US citizens, and we fought in every war since. So we all have different experiences as Latinos. And what we're trying to really challenge now in sort of this post-racial reckoning world is begin to look at our own way we challenge our identity, right? If you look at the history of Latinidad in the United States, it's been whiter, it's been more affluent. If there are, Latinx people here or Latinos who watch Spanish language television, when you look at telenovelas, there wasn't a lot of Black faces. There weren't, it was very, you think of places like Miami where there's an eliteness to it. And that has sort of been the narrative that we've seen. And what I've seen with the younger generation is that they've begun to challenge it. And I encourage that, because I do think we're trying to find a place within our American narrative, in what we are. Where do we belong here? And it's very hard when you think about it, right? When you represent close to 20% of the US population, but there's still major gaps in representation. I work in journalism. I am one of the few Latino leaders in any media outlet right now, and I'm a national outlet. When you go into industry, when you go into academia, I'm sure, the reflection of diversity is not there. We had one of the students who introduced me say, I was in a class of 600 and then there was only 2 Latinx individuals. You start feeling that you're the only one there. So one of the things that I encourage students during Hispanic Heritage Month, or Latinx Hispanic, however you want to identify, is to look at history, but understand that some of what the month is has been imposed on you. Some of what the month is has been sort of a marketing ploy. A perfect example for me is like, all of a sudden I get all these stories about Hispanic Heritage Week as a journalist for a month, and then they all go away. It's not like we disappear. It's not like all Latinos show up on September 15th and then on October 15th, we're out of here in the conversation. So as you begin to look and explore and start the month, I encourage you to challenge what has been told, and challenge it with pride and represent yourself. Have these conversations. They can be uncomfortable, but I think issues of race and anti-racism, we have brought from Latin America, and there's still a lot of things that are happening in our society where we've seen perfect examples. When in the movement for Black Lives last year, you know, in my own family, I have people who are questioning, like, why is this being protested? And we do have a shared history with communities of color in this country, and we have an obligation to continue to explore that, make those connections, and at the same time feel incredibly proud of where you come from. So what I'd like to end with, and before I turn it over to questions and any discussion, and I'm here until you guys need me here for, it's totally fine because I love these conversations, is to just, you know, trust your voice matters, and question it. And don't feel like you have to always believe that what has been told by me in terms of what it is to be Latino, Hispanic in America is something that I need to follow. You are at the cusp of sort of being that next generation that could change, literally is changing the face of this country. And we will be a better country because of your generation, because you are challenging this. And I will leave you with this one last factoid, because identity is messy. It's always who you want to identify as. It's always you. There was a Gallup poll this summer that talked about how Latinos identify themselves, whether they're Hispanic or Latinx or Latina or Latina. And in the end, 58% of all respondents says, it doesn't matter how I get labeled as long as I can be who I am. And I think that is what I like to tell younger students, that you need to be who you are, and anything you are is what matters. And keep asking those questions. I am here right now to answer as many as I can. I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for letting me speak for 20 minutes of the ramblings of what I do, and enjoy your month. And enjoy the food too, because that's a plus of the week. So if there's good food, I've been in college, you know, don't say no to good food as you get through your academic careers. And I want to wish you the best of luck this year. And you are our true heroes, and just, I really, really wish you the best of luck in this academic year. And thank you very much for your time. And I'm here to answer any questions or take any comments, and we can have a discussion. Thank you.
I can start off asking a question. I don't know how they're gonna do it, but you know.
Yeah, I was waiting. I didn't know if I was supposed to moderate this. I'm like, I would, but go ahead. Hi, is your name Karina?
Yeah. Thanks for coming for sure. Like, it's really awesome to have someone, you know, representative of the Latino community, and like being able to put us like at the forefront of like media as well as like behind the scenes. I'm like a media and cinema studies major, hopefully, you know, get into film production. So I kind of want to like get like your perspective on like kind of like how Latino representation is changing like in front of the screen and behind. And like, for example, I want to know what you thought about the new West Side Story that's supposed to come out, and it's representation.
That you just triggered me, but yeah, no, it's all good. Yeah. It's a really good, what we're seeing, and I don't want to knock creativity, because what we're seeing is sort of like what I like to think is like the beginning of the future. So there is slowly but surely progress being made in a very influential part of media, which is entertainment and mass media. And in the age of like Netflix and streaming, and everyone has, 50 channels, we are starting to see more representation. But I think there's so many things to talk about that in a second. I think there's been such a gap with Latino and Latina representation over the years that we're still trying to get to the what I like to call like first generation stories, right? It's like I can't fit in this country, or which I think are very valid, but I also think it's really important to look, and this is where I'm like, let's go to the data, right? So another great source for y'all is Pew Research has done amazing work over the years surveying language from Latinos, or second and third generation Latinos that might have immigrant parents, but they've been living in Illinois for 20 years and going to school and are English dominant. What we're seeing, and this is really important, is that the use of Spanish in the United States by Latinos is actually decreasing. Because what's happened, if you think about it, if you look at the history of immigration and second and third generation, individuals, sons and daughters, aren't going and be like, that's the, I get it from my kids. It's like, I don't want to speak that language. I don't know anyone who speaks it. So you're seeing a much more increase in English and a more of this messy, like bilingual, bicultural way where you have some people who are still managing both languages. And I think what's happened in entertainment, and this is part of the problem, is that, and I've said this so many times, I never get in trouble, but networks like Telemundo and Univision that came out in the 80s and the 90s have kind of dominated sort of the entertainment mass media of the United States when it comes to Latinos. And so what's happened is you get a lot of very Spanish language, you get the telenovelas, you get all this. And then I'm sure, Karina, you watch that and you're like, that doesn't speak to me, right? And you're like, I need to tell my story. So what you're starting to see, which I'm incredibly encouraged by, and I'm going to give you a West Side Story take after this, don't worry about it, I haven't forgotten that, is that you're seeing younger, bicultural, bilingual individuals who have grown up maybe in a Spanish dominant place, and you're starting to see sort of that messiness showing up on screen. It's not happening as much as we'd like to as quickly, but it's beginning to. So I think of things like Gentefied on Netflix, which is a really fantastic series about Boyle Heights in Los Angeles, about gentrification. I think of a show like One Day at a Time, which was like Norman Lear saying, let's switch it to a Cuban American family. And, Rita Moreno is great in anything, and in the original West Side Story as well. And you're starting to see more and more interest in sort of that type of thing, where it's just like, it's a family about Latinos. Like, it's not about like, I'm the striving immigrant showing. I'm not saying that those stories aren't valid. It's just that I think they become stereotypical because the people that are making the decisions, that's what they think Latinos are, right? They don't understand that we're changing, that we're getting more, and this is not we're assimilating, but we're also changing how assimilation is, right? I mean, the fact that I can get great tacos in Mississippi now, I couldn't have got that 20 years ago, but some of the best Central American food I've gotten in Mississippi. So I think you're starting to see more of this. We're starting to get in more into the fabric. We drive the economy. We drive movie theaters, right? 25% of moviegoers are Latino, but only like 1.2% have roles in movies. And that's where it gets into the notion of who's making the decisions. So when we get to West Side Story, which is Steven Spielberg's remake of, as a Puerto Rican, I have a love-hate relationship with West Side Story. I love musicals. I'm the first person to, when the Jets and the Sharks start showing up at the beginning, I'm in. I'm dancing. But at the same time, for me, I'm like, when am I going to have a different Puerto Rican story? And I'm a Puerto Rican creative. Like, why? Because everyone in America thinks every Puerto Rican is like, is living on the West Side. when in fact, I can tell you, like, let's go to Chicago. Let's go to Humboldt Park, right? Do something. Like, take me somewhere else where I can see the Puerto Rican experience. Take me to Orlando. So I think it's slowly but surely happening. But the big problem is it really is about access and power and where the money is. And the only way you can uplift people is you have to support them. So I encourage you to just keep telling your stories, keep being true to yourself. Reach out to Futuro Media after you graduate. You never know. And talk to the people that are kind of thinking like this, and know that there are people that are trying to uplift this. I wish for every one West Side Story, there was 2 other stories that speak to different Puerto Rican experiences. You know what I mean? So that's kind of where I'm at. But I encourage you to don't give up, because I do feel like we're seeing sort of the beginning of the golden age of this type of entertainment, and it's going to get more and more common. But it's not going to be perfect yet, because I do think, like I said, there's still sort of this stereotypical view that we still have to push through. So that's kind of where it's at. I have a great question from JT. Can I just jump in on this one? Because I love what JT put in the chat. So let me just read it. I recently saw an article mentioning the concept of Latinidad should be canceled. As a journalist, what do you make of the concept and the call of some of it to cancel it? I think this is exactly where the space that I'm in right now. And this is something that I really, really love talking about, JT. And thank you for asking the question. It goes back to what I was trying to say a little bit at the beginning, and I'll expand a little bit more. We've gone through sort of this racial soul searching as Americans, right? During this pandemic, during the murder of George Floyd, which now it is a murder, right? That's what it was. And there's this notion that Latinidad has not been inclusive, which is true, has been whiter, does not bring in the indigenous or the Afro-Latino experience. And then when it does, those voices get put off like in a little corner, as if it's like, oh, well, here's your little checklist item. And now you feel good, pat on the back, Afro-Latinidad. And I think the only way we change it, and, I know people, some people will feel when they hear the word cancel, it's like, you're not giving people expression. But I think it's what I like to say is vigorously challenge it, right? Because canceling, like, for me, is something that I respect people who do that, who say, I don't want to identify like this. I want to identify like this. And this is why I'm doing it. And I'm going to explain to you why. And I always come from the world that however someone wants to identify is correct, right? No one should impose anything on anyone. I mean, as long as you're leading with authenticity and your heart and what you truly believe, you don't want to deceive people, because we believe in moral character. But I think it's really important that this notion of questioning it, right? I mean, like I said, I'm never going to question great Puerto Rican food because I'm the first person to eat it. But at the same time, I will question the fact that, I, as an editorial leader, have to always ask myself, is my group representative of the community I want to cover? You know what I mean? It's like, because we've had that problem as well. When you think about Latinos in media, it's like New York and LA. And I'm trying to be like, wait, do we have a producer from, the Rio Grande Valley in Texas? Do I have an Afro-Latino producer? Do I have someone who identifies as indigenous from the Midwest? That takes intentionality, which I think is something that's very important for every organization to begin to examine. It's uncomfortable because it's very easy to just kind of say like, hey, Hispanic Heritage Month, yay. But that's why I say, I encourage, and academia is a place where you can have these conversations, to have that ability to say, hey, wait, hold up, this is how I feel, and this is why, and here's the proof. I mean, as a journalist, I'm like, if you can come with receipts and proof, that is, to make your case, to make your argument, to say, that's why I say, like, look at the census, look at Pew, look at what people are saying, look at that article about canceling Latinidad, explore it, dissect it, knock it down, lift it up, say what you like, say what you don't like. That's only going to help the conversation. So I hope that answered your question, JT. I really loved it. And so thank you. Any other questions at all? Thanks, JT. Nothing too small or big. It doesn't matter to me. Doesn't have to be or if anyone has any feelings about Hispanic Heritage Month. Comments or things, but if there are no questions, I can turn it back over to the moderator. I really appreciate your time. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's Julito77, JULITO77, also at Latino Rebels. We have Facebook, we're on Instagram. If you're interested in learning more, we've written about this. Latino USA, we talk about it in the thick. So it's something that I live and breathe all the time. And again, I'll leave you with this: always question, always be curious. Your voice matters. Uplift us, challenge the older generation, lead with love and authenticity, and just really crush it in college. Like, enjoy it. Really enjoy this, because you are our future, and the future is in very good hands. So thank you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Valera. We appreciate you being here. My name is Marisol Corral, and I am a fourth-year student in business program. I am also a member of the Hispanic Student Union here at SIUE. I appreciated what you shared with us today, and also greatly appreciate you starting the hard conversations that most of us are not really necessarily brave enough to really speak about. So I really do appreciate that, and also just very inspirational seeing, even if we don't necessarily have a lot of representation, up there, it's really inspiring to even just have you with us today too. So yeah, thank you again for the extra time to answer the questions we had. And now at this time, we'll be hearing from closing remarks from Dr. Sheila Caldwell. Dr. Caldwell currently serves as the Southern Illinois University System Office Vice President for Anti-Racism, Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and Chief Diversity Officer. She has served in multiple leadership roles over the past 25 years to cultivate inclusive excellence on college campuses. Her aim is to ensure all students, faculty, and staff members can bring their full authentic selves to SIU and achieve their full potential. Thank you for being here, and we'd love to hear from you, Dr. Caldwell.
First, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and I especially want to thank Mr. Valera. I learned a great deal from you. And as we live in a country of inventions, we know that racial, the category is a social construct. So you reminded us that not only did America invent Black and white and Asian, they also invented Hispanics. So thank you for reminding us that we live in this innovative country. But what I also want to say is, as you were sharing the data, we also know that there are 62 million Hispanics in America. And what I really respect and appreciate about what you shared is that you told your own story. Oftentimes we have other people telling our stories for us. So as we think about the census data and the growth, we have an opportunity to hear 62 million unique stories. We know that there are 62 million Latinos contributing to this country. And so there's a lot to learn. And I think that's why this month and really this whole year is so important, because it gives us space and opportunity to learn and to hear these unique stories, and also to understand more greatly how Latinos have contributed to who we are as America. It's not, it is their story. I mean, we are all Americans, and you have reminded us of that in such an eloquent way. So I thank you for your contribution to the media, for that unique perspective. And I hope that we continue to engage and learn more, because even at SIUE, there are many opportunities to do that. The next event is virtual, and it will be this Thursday, September 16th at 4 o'clock. You mentioned food, but we also want to think about entertainment and dance. So Salsa at the Met by Jose Obando. That's a 350-year evolution of salsa that traces to the development of salsa, beginning with the manufacture and use of percussion by Africans. So we encourage you to really participate in that. It's actually going to show the evolution over 350 years. So that's very exciting, and there's a lot to learn there. We're also going to continue the month with Conversations of Understanding on October 20th, which will kick off SIU Diversity Day on October 21st. So we invite you to do that. But again, this has been a stellar event and a great way to kick off Hispanic Heritage Month. And we thank you so much to all of you for joining. And we thank you for being a part of this special kickoff, Mr. Valera. And you all have a great evening.
Thank you very much. Enjoy.
Thank you. I can't even say anything else. That's it. Yeah.
Bye-bye, everyone. Take care. Have a great night. Thank you again. Thank you.
Yeah, the camera's right here. Yeah. Yes. And for those who are joining us virtually, thank you so much for coming, and we're closing our event. We greatly appreciate your attendance. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Okay.